Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me for another video. Joe here with Tufel Gun and Armory, and today's video is going to be the fifth installment in our AR instructional series. Taking what we've done from the first four videos, we are going to be adding a couple of parts in this video. We are going to be adding the pivot and takedown pins, and we're going to be adding the buffer kit. And the reason that we are adding the buffer kit as well is the latch plate that's right here on the back actually holds in the spring and detent for the takedown pin. So if you don't add them at the same time, it will leave springs unsecured, and then you will be when you come around to work on it again, you'll be missing stuff. So it's just better to do these parts together in your build process, and we're going to get started doing that. Now, first things first, I do want to give a shout out to a man I met yesterday, the Coffee Bean Vet, a guy by the name of Chris. Met him at one of the Christmas events here in Oklahoma City, and he does really good work for veterans, makes great coffee. I bought a bag of Locked and Loaded, which he describes as the medium side of dark roast, but still a dark roast nonetheless. And it's super good coffee, so go check him out, check out his website, maybe buy a bag of coffee, and drink it black like we all like. That being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. For the parts, you have your pivot pin and your takedown pin. Your pivot pin is longer, and that's going to go on the front of the lower receiver out of the two. So your pivot pin will go right here, and your takedown pin will go right here. And the reason for that is your pivot pin is what allows your upper receiver to pivot like so, so you can access the bolt and charging handle and the insides without having to fully take apart the entire firearm. The takedown pin is the one that actually allows you to access that stuff without having to remove the upper receiver from it. It's allowed to pivot around that pivot one. Hence why it's called that. But while the two pins, the pivot and takedown pins, are different sizes, the detents and springs for both of them are exactly the same size. And it is really hard to get a shot of this detent, but it's basically the same size. You're going to have two identical springs and two identical detents. This is not to be confused with the one that goes for the safety selector that actually looks like a projectile and cartridge casing. These are rounded on both ends. On that safety one in the previous video, one side is rounded and one side is flat. Kind of looks like a 9mm casing. So we're going to get started. I will say that when doing this, a lot of these contents are going to be spring loaded while you're doing them. So keep that in mind. It is good to wear safety goggles when you are working with spring loaded or contents under pressure. So go ahead and throw those on real quick. And the only tool that we're going to need is this flathead. This is a smaller jewelry flathead, but any super small flathead will work. And all you're going to be doing is essentially you're going to be holding that detent down while you move the pin past it, just like so. And when you move that pin past it, that detent is going to be forced into the groove on the inside of the pin, which you can see right here. There's a groove that runs from one side to the other, and that allows that detent to stay in place while you operate the pin out and in of your firearm as needed. So for that, on the right side of your firearm in the front, you have this hole right here, and that is where your spring and your detent are going to go. Spring first, detent second. I can say from experience that having one of these detents and springs fly across your shop are not fun to find after the fact. So just like that. Glad I'm wearing eyeglasses. That's exactly why. That was a straight headshot. Had there been a bullet, I'd probably be toast. But you're going to take that detent and you're going to push it down into that hole, just like so, using that small screwdriver. And then you're going to slide the screwdriver out while you push the pin in, just like so. And you heard that click. And now, as you can see, you can no longer take out that pivot pin. That detent is holding in place right there. You can see that silver detent, and that's going to be pushing it in and out, and it remains in place, but it secures that pin. So now we have that pivot pin done. Moving on to the takedown pin. This one is actually easier because instead of having to use a small tool to hold it in place, we're actually going to be screwing on this latch plate and buffer tube. So you just take the buffer tube and moving that castle nut and latch plate all the way to the rear, you are going to screw it into the back of your lower receiver, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And you don't want to do it all the way because you don't want to move it past this hole right here just yet. Right there. So let me get this hole right here is for the spring and detent for the buffer kit. And this little notch right here on this detent is what holds your buffer and buffer spring in place. And so you're just going to bring it just a little bit for now. Basically to that point. And now you can push this in. So your pivot pin, I don't know if you can see here, but you got your buffer tube, and your buffer tube is right on the edge of that hole where that pivot and detent come in. And so you're going to take your takedown pin, and you're going to put it right in here, making sure that that groove, that same groove that's on the pivot pin is going to be right here, and that's where that detent is going to go into. So having that up, just going to kind of show you here. You have that pin. Here, let me see if I can get a better shot of it. Just like that. So that groove right here is going to be facing the rear of the firearm. And that's because this hole right here that's behind that latch plate, that's where your detent and spring are going to go. Except this time you're going to do the detent first because you're actually, instead of putting the pin to the detent, you're putting the detent to the pin. And so we are going to push that in about halfway. We're going to drop that detent into place. And then we're going to take that spring and we're going to drop that spring into place there. And that spring is going to be spring loaded under that latch plate, just like so. So as you tighten down the buffer kit, it's going to push that spring in. It is important to note that there is a reason that you have a notch right here that kind of protrudes in to the back of the firearm. Let me see if I can get a better angle of it right there. So that latch plate is going to come with a protruded side and a recessed side, and the recessed side goes out. So you can see the protrusion right here, and you can see the recess right here. So that recessed side is going to go out, and that protruded side is going to slide right into that slot. And that's going to allow that spring-loaded pin to stay there, just like so. Now at this point, you're going to want to hold that latch plate into place because you do have a spring-loaded, a detent spring and detent that are spring-loaded that you don't want flying across your shop. And now you're going to take that spring for your buffer kit, and you're going to place it down in that hole just like so. And the detent with the little notch is going to go actually around the spring on top of it, just like so. I'm going to switch this around real quick, still holding on to it with my thumb, but it's going to be right here. And you're going to have to push that down as you get tighter with the, oops. Going too fast. So you're going to take the buffer kit and you're going to screw it in, being careful not to catch that spring because you can inadvertently slingshot it across just like that. You can see it starting to hit across the way. And that, just like so, is good, because here's where we're at here. So you have that castle nut, which is gonna, that castle nut and that latch plate. That latch plate is gonna hold that spring into place once you tighten it down. Your buffer detent right here is going to be partially covered up. Let me see if I can get a better angle of light here. It's going to be partially covered up by your buffer tube. But you don't want your buffer tube screwed in so far to where it protrudes past here, because that will disallow you to place the upper receiver on and have it flush and tight. It'll actually prevent you from closing your rifle if you screw it on too much. So you want it flush and holding that detent in right there. And then you're going to push down the latch plate just like so and tighten down your castle nut. Okay. Now, I will say that with the castle nut, it is good. Hand tightened is not ideal. You can use a, where's that? Armorer's wrench, or you can actually buy a castle nut tool by itself. This is just a cheap, I think it was Wheeler, armorer's wrench. And this end right here with this little notch, looks like a spanner wrench. This will slide in just like that into these grooves in the castle nut. And then you just want to tighten it just a little bit. That way it's not hand tightened, but it's not so tight to where you can't get it off if you need be, so that right there, you're going to have your buffer tube, the castle nut and latch plate tightened, and you're going to have your two pins like this and like this that are locked in to the lower receiver. And while you can still operate them, they do not come out of the rifle at this point unless you take that tool and you hold down that detent and get that detent out of that groove again. And in 15 years of dealing with the AR15 platform, I have never once been in a situation where I had to remove these pins from the rifle. So I don't expect you to have that problem, but if you did have that problem, that's how you would do it. You would get a tool and you would hold that detent down, same way you did to put it on, and slide that pin out. And the back one, basically undo everything you did with the buffer tube. So now that we have that in place, we can take our buffer and buffer spring and slide it right into the back of the buffer tube. This is a carbine buffer tube and buffer and spring from Dirty Bird Industries. And now that that's in place, we can take the upper receiver and we can slide those pins in. And now you have the next part of our build complete. So in today's video, we did the pivot pin, the takedown pin, and the buffer system. And the next video, be adding the buttstock and talking about the barrel and different things with there. I'm going to bring in a barrel and we're going to build the upper receiver out from there. So thank you for joining me for this video. Once again, go check out the Coffee Bean Vet. My man Chris over there. Grab yourself some coffee, give him support. And if y'all have any questions, be sure to drop them in the comments below. I love to hear from y'all. At this stage in my career, I still am able to answer each and every person that has a question, that has a comment, and let's generate those discussions and lift everybody up together. So thank y'all for joining me for this video. Once again, my name is Joe here at Tufel Gun and Armory, and y'all have a good day. See y'all next time.